Many months ago, what feels like a lifetime ago, we talked about Indian independence and partition. And where we left things was the birth of two countries, India and Pakistan, and great amounts of bloodshed, the result of intercommunal fighting between the Hindu and Muslim communities of colonial India. We did not, however, spend a great deal of time talking to the details of the war that was fought between the two nations over disputed territory. I'm your host David, and today we are going to look at the 1947 Indo-Pakistani War centered on the disputed territory of Jammu and Kashmir, a Cold War flashpoint, one that remains to this day. This is the Cold War. I cannot overstate the value of learning and of increasing your knowledge. They are among the best things you can do for yourself, which is why I love the sponsor of today's video, Magellan TV. Magellan TV's historical documentaries are a great way to learn about new subjects, as well as learn more about things you're already familiar with. If you've ever wondered about the impact that humanity has had on our planet, then you need to check out Age of Man: The New Deal. It's an exploration of how civilizations in the past have dealt with climate crisis to help answer if humanity is prepared for our future. And the good news is, Magellan TV has much more than that. There are more than 3,000 documentaries waiting for you, and hundreds of them are on the history of various eras. We particularly love the travel documentaries on Magellan TV, as they are a perfect way to visit various countries in stunning 4K from the comfort of one's home. New documentaries are added weekly and available on most devices, including phones and PCs. Magellan TV has a kind and exclusive offer for our viewers. Click the link in the description to get a 1-month free trial and watch hundreds of history documentaries anytime, anywhere. So, we'll start this story in 1846. Yes, 1846, not 1946. The Treaty of Amritsar between the British East India Company and Raja Gulab Singh established the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir under the suzerainty of the British Indian Empire. A century later, as the empire was preparing to leave the Indian subcontinent, the area of Jammu and Kashmir would become the center of discord between the two newly created states of India and Pakistan. By 1947, the independence of the subcontinent was not in any doubt. However, there was one major issue that still hadn't been resolved. Lord Mountbatten had replaced Lord Wavell as Viceroy in March of that year and was tasked by Prime Minister Attlee to ensure a unitary government for the new state, but it quickly became apparent that a confederation could not be formed. The Muslim population and the All India Muslim League kept pushing for the creation of a separate state, and the endemic violence between them and the Hindu community certainly did not aid in de-escalating the situation. In fact, the violence helped in advancing the date of the transfer of power to the new dominions of India and Pakistan by almost an entire year. The original date that had been decided on was June 1948, but Mountbatten rescheduled it to the 15th of August 1947. The challenge was that this new date gave only a small window of time for officials to tie up loose ends and finalize the borders between the two newly created states. The rulers of the princely states that made up the British Raj were given the choice of joining either India or Pakistan by executing a legal document known as the Instrument of Accession. But while for many of the Rajas the choice was obvious, the same could not be said for Maharaja Hari Singh of Jammu and Kashmir. The demographics of the two areas made picking either side extremely difficult, if not almost impossible. The province of Kashmir had an overwhelmingly Muslim majority, while Jammu's case was more complex, with an equal number of both Hindus and Muslims living in the eastern districts, a large Buddhist population in Ladakh, and the predominantly Muslim western districts, as well as the Gilgit Agency in the north. Consequently, the political scene in the princely state was divided. Sheikh Abdullah of Jammu and Kashmir National Conference Party was associated with the All India National Congress, and Jawaharlal Nehru, who would go on to serve as India's Prime Minister for 17 years, supported the accession to India, while the Muslim Conference, led by Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, a former associate of Abdullah, favored a merger with Pakistan. Yet, the man responsible for deciding the fate of Jammu and Kashmir, the aforementioned Maharaja Hari Singh, remained indecisive. He was unable to pick a side, fearing that a merge with Pakistan would lead to the persecution of the religious minorities of the region and anger the Indian Congress, while siding with India would naturally upset the Muslim majority. There is additionally also the possibility that the Maharaja may have entertained thoughts of remaining independent. Even a personal visit by Mountbatten was not enough to shake the Maharaja's uncertainty, and instead of discussing the future of his state with the viceroy, he preferred to avoid him altogether. In contrast, however, it is rumored that Gandhi's visit to Kashmir in the first week of August did affect Singh's disposition and convinced him to join India, although Gandhi had stated that his journey to the area was not political in nature. At the very least, the Maharaja seemed willing to hold a referendum to decide which dominion he would join, and even signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan on the 12th of the month. However, the 15th of August came and passed, and Kashmir still remained independent, a status it would hold for the next 73 days. However, continued independence was simply not an option, and trouble in the region was already brewing. In fact, trouble had been brewing for quite some time in Poonch, which was an autonomous principality inside the princely state and was governed by a relative of Hari Singh. The region had provided the majority of the soldiers from the states of Jammu and Kashmir that had fought with the British during the Second World War, but upon returning home, they received no hero's welcome. Instead, they were treated with suspicion by the Maharaja, who was alarmed by the fact that they had been allowed to keep their weapons. Because of this, they were not allowed to join the Maharaja's army. On top of that, they were subject to such heavy taxation that a British social worker, Richard Simmons, commented that an additional tax was introduced to pay for the cost of taxation. The final stroke came in July when Hari Singh ordered all Muslims in the districts to surrender their guns. Believing a massacre against the Muslim population was coming, they bought new weapons from the Northwest Frontier tribes and prepared for an armed uprising against the Maharaja's army. By the middle of August, the now independent ruler was facing open revolt. Now, it's at this point where the story begins to become increasingly convoluted, as sources from either of the two sides provide different versions of events, with Muslim conference sources recounting that the Maharaja's army brutally fired on crowds of people and wiped out entire villages. However, according to Indian sources, at roughly the same time, the Pakistani army formulated a plan codenamed Operation Gulmarg to invade the princely state, with 20 Lashkars being formed at Abbottabad. A Lashkar is a tribal militia made up of 1,000 Pashtun tribesmen. The attack was scheduled for the 22nd of October and would follow two main axes of advance. 6 Lashkars would move along the main road from Muzaffarabad to Srinagar via Domel, Uri, and Baramulla, tasked with capturing the aerodrome and then moving towards the Banahal Pass. 2 Lashkars would protect the spearhead's right flank by advancing from the Hajipir Pass to Gulmarg, while an equally strong force would move from Tithwal to Nastachun Pass and capture Sopore, Handwara, and Bandipur. In the meantime, the other 10 Lashkars would link up with the rebel forces still active in Poonch, Bimber, and Rawalkot, and then push towards Jammu. We should note here that the Indian sources claim the plan was accidentally leaked to an Indian officer stationed in Pakistan, who then managed to relay this information to officials in Delhi on the 19th of October, though his claims were not initially believed to be true. On the other hand, the Pakistani version of events denies the existence of such a plan altogether. But whether the plan existed or not, the result was the same, as on the 22nd of October, after a period during which Jammu and Kashmir had suffered from multiple armed uprisings and economic sanctions imposed by Pakistan, the Pashtun tribal attack began. The invading force caught the Maharaja's army completely by surprise and proceeded to advance to the city of Baramulla within 4 days. At the same time, in the northern part of the princely state in Gilgit, the Gilgit Scouts, the Maharaja's paramilitary force, switched their allegiance and took control of the area, joining the invading forces. Events were rapidly succeeding each other, and it was this chaotic environment that spurred the Maharaja to finally make a decision. Alarmed by the sudden invasion, Hari Singh made an urgent appeal to the Indian government for help on the 24th of October. Since India could not just send troops into a neutral state, an action that would have given Pakistan grounds to act in similar fashion, all legal formalities had to be followed. The Maharaja had to sign an instrument of accession and formally side with India. It was accepted on the 27th of October by Lord Mountbatten, and on the morning of the same day, 300 soldiers from the 1st Sikh Battalion were airlifted into the city of Srinagar. However, the hastiness with which the whole process was conducted, and the fact that the Kashmiri people were not able to voice their opinion on the issue of accession by means of a referendum, gave grounds for people to question the legality of the result. Now, back on the evolving battlefield, Indian forces had taken positions on the Patan Heights on the outskirts of Srinagar, establishing a defensive perimeter. There, they managed to repel the attacking tribal forces, holding the city and the airfields at Bagdan, which played a vital role as reinforcements continued to be dispatched by air. Fighting continued throughout the following days, with the defenders even retreating from the heights, but on the 7th of November, the growing Indian forces were strong enough to launch a counterattack. It proved to be extremely successful and forced the attackers to retreat, while the Indian troops pursued them all the way to Baramulla and Uri, recapturing the latter on the 13th of November. There, they were forced to halt and turn their focus towards the attack that was developing in the south. On the southern axis of attack, the invading forces' primary objective was to advance towards Jammu, a point of significant strategic importance, as its capture would cut off Kashmir from the rest of India and make defending the region virtually impossible. In their way stood the weak and isolated garrisons of the cities, but despite their weakness, they put up stiff resistance, forcing the attackers to besiege multiple settlements. By the 20th of October, Kotli, Mirpur, Jangar, Poonch, and Nashwara were under siege, while Rajouri had been captured. As the situation in the besieged garrisons grew more and more dire, a relief column was sent out on the 17th of November. The 50th Parachute Brigade was ordered to move from Akhnur to assist the defenders and managed to relieve the besieged garrisons at Nashera and Jangar on the 22nd, but was then unable to advance any further. As a result, Mirpur and Kotli were captured on the 25th and 28th of the month respectively. On the 20th of November, elements of the Indian 161st Brigade also moved southwards from Uri with the objective of breaking the siege of Poonch, but while the first echelon managed to reach the town, it was not enough, and further attempts at reinforcing the defenders at Poonch were thwarted by the besieging troops. After the capture of Mirpur and Kotli by the Muslim tribal forces, those men were able to join others in attacking and capturing Jangar on the 24th of December. Their simultaneous assaults at Nashera and Uri, however, were not met with success. At the same time, a minor Indian attack secured the area of Chamb. Following these attacks, the front line became somewhat stable, with no major changes happening until mid-March, when Indian forces launched a counterattack in the Jammu Valley, codenamed Operation Vijay. On March 14th, Indian forces from the 50th Parachute and 14th Infantry Brigades attacked along the road that connected Nashera to Jangar, and 3 days later, they had reached the outskirts of Jangar. There, Pakistani forces counterattacked, focusing on the Indian center in the hopes of quickly breaking the spearhead of the attack. While they were successful in pushing the center back, the Indian flanks enveloped the Pakistani forces in a double pincer move. Surrounded on three sides, they had no other option than to retreat to the towns of Mirpur and Kotli. In the follow-up to Operation Vijay on the 8th of April, the Indian Army launched another attack with the goal of recapturing Rajouri, which they accomplished on the 12th, while at the same time, on the Srinagar front, Indian forces managed to retake Tithwal. But while Indian forces were successful on two fronts, the Gilgit Scouts and the Pakistani forces in the northernmost part of the province had been advancing. They had laid siege to the city of Skardu and thwarted every attempt made by the Indian Army to break the siege. Over the following month, they managed to infiltrate through mountainous paths and captured Kargil and Dras, threatening Srinagar from the northeast. This also gave them a clear road to the city of Leh, where they set under siege. In the following months, Pakistani forces came very close to taking the city, but ultimately they were unable to overcome the Indian defenses. They were successful, however, in taking Skardu on the 14th of August after a siege that had lasted months. In the following weeks, the Indian positions in Leh were reinforced to the point of being able to launch an attack of their own, and a plan was formulated for a two-pronged offensive against Pakistani forces. The garrison inside Leh would break out of the city and move towards Kargil, while another force advancing from Srinagar would move first to Dras and then Kargil, but to do so, the Indian army had to retake the Zojila Pass. Early assaults on the pass in September had been met with stiff resistance from Pakistani troops, but the Indian command came up with a very creative, some would even say crazy, plan of transferring to the region M5 Stuart light tanks, which had been dismantled by using mule paths through the mountains. They looked to achieve total secrecy regarding the transportation of the tanks to the front lines. On the 1st of November, after the necessary preparations had been made and the weather had cleared enough to allow military operations, Indian forces launched Operation Bison, once more attacking the defending Pakistani positions in the Zojila Pass. This time, they emerged victorious, and by the 24th, they had captured Kargil, forcing the Pakistani forces to retreat towards Skardu. The Indian advance was, however, discontinued as they met stiff resistance from Pakistani soldiers, and the settling winter weather forbid all military operations. The fall of 1948 saw another major Indian offensive running parallel to Operation Bison. Nicknamed Operation Easy, it had the not-so-easy objective of relieving the besieged Indian troops in Poonch by launching an attack from Rajouri. The first stages of the operation began on October 15th by capturing Pir Badasar and managed to trick the Pakistani command into thinking that Kotli was the target of the attack, which forced them to withdraw forces from other sectors to reinforce the city. As a result, Indian forces faced significantly less resistance, and they reached Poonch on the 19th of November, bringing an end to the year-long siege of the garrison there. Plans to advance further into Pakistani-controlled areas required a significantly larger concentration of forces than were available, and further attacks were postponed for the spring of 1949. Fighting was not to resume then, however, as after lengthy debates in the United Nations that had begun as early as January of 1948, a ceasefire was negotiated and imposed on the 1st of January 1949. According to the terms of the ceasefire, Pakistan had to withdraw its forces, both regular and irregular, and India was allowed to maintain in Jammu and Kashmir only the minimum number of troops necessary for preserving law and order. Following these conditions, a referendum was supposed to be held to determine the future of the state in accordance with the people's will. We would like to say that this was the last time Kashmir was engulfed in the flames of war, but that would be a lie. Both India and Pakistan continued to lay claims to the area, each with their own arguments supporting their case about who should rule the region. As the Cold War deepened and progressed, the tensions in Kashmir always threatened to spill over, bringing two regional powers, one with ties to the Soviet Union and the other to the United States, into conflict with each other. This ongoing argument has spilled over into war twice since then, in 1965 and 1999. We will look at one of these wars in a future episode. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and to make sure you don't miss all of our future episodes, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and have dug in your garrisons on mountain peaks in order to protect and defend the most precious, the bell button. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of our patrons and subscribers, and if you aren't yet a patron, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/thecoldwar or through YouTube membership. We can be reached via email at thecoldwarchannel@gmail.com. This is the Cold War Channel, and as we think about the Cold War, I will leave you with the words of JFK. In the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal.